They sent her as a sacrificial bride to the Vampire King, called her worthless, cursed, unfit to breathe the same air as their golden daughter, said her silver eyes were a mark of misfortune, that she'd bring nothing but ruin to anyone who looked at her too long. But when the Vampire King lifted his mask in front of 10,000 witnesses, they learned the truth. She wasn't the reject, she wasn't the broken one. They were. In 30 days, Morel went from invisible servant to the queen who tamed a king who had forgotten what it meant to feel. But first she had to survive the castle where servants who touched the mask died mysteriously, where the king ate alone in darkness, where nobody had seen his true face in 792 years. This is that story. And it starts not with a palace, but with a girl on her knees scrubbing stones in a house that would never be home. The bucket of wash water had gone cold an hour ago, but Morel kept scrubbing, kept her head down, kept her silver eyes fixed on the gray stone floor of the entrance hall, watching her own hands turn red and raw as she worked the brush in slow, deliberate circles. It was better this way. Safer. When you looked down, people forgot you were there. When you stayed quiet, they stopped seeing you as a threat. And in Vivian Ashford's house, being seen was dangerous. Morel, the voice cut through the morning silence like a blade, sharp, cold, familiar in the worst way. She didn't look up, just kept scrubbing. The rhythm was almost meditative now. Circle, circle, dip, ring, circle, circle, dip, ring. Morel, I know you can hear me. This time the voice was closer, close enough that Morel could smell the rose oil Vivian always wore, expensive, imported from the southern provinces. The kind of luxury that reminded everyone in Asheville that Vivian Ashford had married well, that she lived in the finest house in the village, that her daughter Isadora wore silk while other girls wore wool. Morel set down the brush, rose slowly to her feet, kept her eyes lowered. Yes, ma'am. Vivian stood in the archway between the entrance hall and the parlor, backlit by the morning sun streaming through the tall windows behind her. It created a halo effect around her perfectly coiffed dark hair, her emerald day dress, the pearl choker at her throat. She looked like a painting, expensive, untouchable, beautiful in the way that valuable things are beautiful, not warm, not kind, just aesthetically correct. The market opens in an hour, Vivian said. Her voice carried that particular tone she used when she wanted to sound benevolent, patient, like she was doing Morel a favor by speaking to her at all. Isadora needs new ribbons for her hair. The blue ones. You know which. It wasn't a question. Yes, ma'am. Take the coin from the jar in the kitchen. Don't dawdle. And Morel? Vivian's green eyes finally met hers. For just a moment, just long enough to deliver the warning. Try not to look at anyone directly. Your eyes upset people. The words landed like they always did. Not cruel exactly. Vivian was never cruel in an obvious way. She was too careful for that, too aware of how things looked. But the message was clear, had always been clear since Morel's father died 6 years ago and left his second wife in charge of everything. You are not like Isadora. You will never be like Isadora. Stop trying. Stop hoping. Accept what you are. Yes, ma'am. Vivian swept away the scent of roses lingering in the air after she was gone. Morel stood there for 3 breaths, 4 letting the familiar ache in her chest settle back down into that place where she kept all the things she couldn't say. Then she picked up the bucket, carried it to the kitchen, dumped the cold gray water into the yard, and went to find the coin jar. Her reflection caught her in the kitchen window as she counted out the copper pieces. Silver eyes stared back at her from a face that was too thin, too pale, too angular to be called pretty by Asheville standards. Her dark hair hung in a simple braid down her back. No ribbons, no ornaments, just practical and out of the way. She looked like what she was. A girl who worked. A girl who scrubbed floors and fetched water and tried very hard not to be noticed. But the eyes, those damned silver eyes, they'd been her father's eyes. He'd called them beautiful once, called them rare, said they meant she was special, that she'd do extraordinary things. Then he'd died and Vivian had different words for them. Cursed, unnatural, unlucky. And maybe Vivian was right, because 6 years of bad luck was hard to argue with. Morel pocketed the coins and left through the kitchen door, taking the back way into the village. It was early enough that the streets were mostly empty. A few merchants setting up their stalls. A dog nosing through scraps near the baker's shop. Morning mist still clinging to the cobblestones, turning everything soft and gray and quiet. She liked the quiet, liked the way Asheville looked before it woke up properly. Before the crowds and the noise in the eyes that always seemed to find her no matter how carefully she kept her head down. The market was just beginning to stir when she arrived. Merchants calling out their wares. The smell of fresh bread mixing with leather and spices, and the earthy scent of vegetables still wet from the morning harvest. Morel moved through it like a ghost, small, unobtrusive, navigating by memory and instinct to the ribbon seller's stall near the fountain. Blue ribbons, she said to the merchant, keeping her voice low, her eyes on the display. The silk ones, enough for, well, if it isn't the Ashford charity case. The voice made Morel's shoulders tighten. She knew that voice. Knew it the way you know the sound of thunder before a storm. Isadora. She turned slowly. Vivian's daughter stood 3 feet away, flanked by 2 other girls from the village. Both of them dressed well, both of them watching Morel with the kind of casual cruelty that came from knowing they were untouchable. Isadora was beautiful. That was just fact. Honey blonde hair that caught the light like spun gold. Blue eyes the color of summer sky. A face that painters would want to immortalize. At 24, she'd been proposed to 7 times. Turned them all down. Said she was waiting for someone worthy of her. Someone with real power, real status. She looked at Morel the way you'd look at a stain on expensive fabric. Annoying, unfortunate, easily dismissed. Shopping for me again. Isadora smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. How thoughtful. Though I do wonder why Mother keeps sending you. You're so clumsy. Last time you dropped the entire parcel in the mud. One, that was because you pushed her, one of the other girls whispered. Too loud to be accidental. Isadora's smile widened. Did I? I don't recall. Do you recall, Morel? This was the game. The one they'd played for 6 years. Isadora would humiliate her. Morel would stay quiet. Accept it. Go home. Tomorrow would be the same. And the day after that. And the day after that. You are not like Isadora. Accept what you are. No, miss, Morel said quietly. I don't recall. There. See, Isadora reached out, patted Morel's cheek with her gloved hand. The gesture looked affectionate to anyone watching. To Morel, it felt like a brand. Such a good girl. So obedient. It's a shame about the eyes, really. Otherwise, you might almost be presentable. The merchant coughed awkwardly. Wrapped the blue ribbons. Morel paid. Corb took the parcel, started to turn away. Oh, Morel, Isadora's voice stopped her, sweet as poisoned honey. Do try to walk straight on the way home. We wouldn't want you to trip and ruin my ribbons. Again. Laughter followed Morel as she left the market. Not loud, not cruel enough to draw intervention, just enough to sting, just enough to remind her of her place. She was halfway home when she noticed the bird. It lay on the side of the road, small and brown and broken. One wing bent at an angle that made Morel's stomach turn. Still alive, though, she could see its chest moving. Rapid, desperate, dying. She should keep walking. She was already late. Vivian would notice, would ask questions, would find some way to make it Morel's fault. But the bird's eyes were open, looking at her, and Morel had never been good at walking away from things that hurt. She set down the parcel, knelt in the dirt, extended her hands slowly, carefully, palm up and open. Hey, she whispered. Hey, little one, it's okay. I won't hurt you. The bird should have been terrified, should have tried to flee to fight, to do anything except what it did. It went still. Not the stillness of fear. Something else. Something Morel had never found words for but recognized all the same. A kind of trust that didn't make sense, that shouldn't exist between a dying bird and a strange girl on a country road. She'd been like this since she was small. Animals responded to her, calmed when she spoke, gentled when she touched them. Her father had called it a gift. Vivian called it unnatural. Morel didn't call it anything. It just was. She cupped her hands around the bird, felt the rapid flutter of its heartbeat against her palm. And then warmth. It started in her chest, spread down her arms, flowed into her hands like liquid light, though there was no light to see. Nothing visible, just the sensation of something moving through her, something old and patient and kind, pouring into the broken bird until the wings straightened. The heartbeat steadied. The bird chirped once, twice, then took flight from her hands in a flutter of brown feathers and impossible recovery. Morel sat back on her heels, breathing hard, staring at her empty palms. This part was new. This had never happened before. She'd calmed animals, soothed them. But healing, that was different. That was unnatural, she whispered to herself. Vivian's word, Vivian's voice in her head, even when Vivian wasn't there. She grabbed the parcel, stood, started walking faster. Don't think about it. Don't question it. Don't let anyone see. Just be invisible. Just survive another day. The riders came 3 days later, and everything changed. They arrived at midday when the sun was highest and hottest, turning the village square into a haze of dust and heat. Three of them, mounted on black horses that moved too smoothly, too quietly, like shadows given form and purpose. They wore black armor, black cloaks, and on their chests, emblazoned in silver that caught the light like captured moonbeams, the mark of the night realm. A wolf's head crowned with a crescent moon, the symbol of the vampire king. The entire village stopped. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Mothers pulled their children inside. Men who'd served in the border wars went pale and still remembering things they didn't speak about in daylight. Because everyone in Asheville knew what that symbol meant. Everyone in every village within 500 miles knew. Lucian Corvus, the vampire king, ruler of the night realm and the 12 territories that bowed to his throne. A king who'd ruled for 8 centuries, who'd never been defeated in battle, who wore a mask that no living soul had ever seen him remove. And his riders didn't come to villages like Asheville unless they wanted something. Morel watched from the kitchen window as Vivian smoothed her dress, checked her hair in the mirror, and walked out to greet them. Watched as the lead rider dismounted, as he pulled a scroll from his saddlebag, as he began to read in a voice that carried across the square with unnatural clarity. By decree of His Majesty Lucian Corvus, King of the Night Realm, Sovereign of the 12 territories, Lord of Shadow and Moonlight. The titles went on. Morel stopped listening to the words, started listening to the rhythm, the cadence, the weight behind them. This wasn't a tax collection. This wasn't a military conscription. This was something else. Each household of good standing shall present one candidate for consideration as companion to His Majesty. The candidate must be female between the ages of 18 and 25 of sound body and clear mind. Blood testing will be conducted immediately. Those found suitable will journey to Shadowkeep Castle for final selection. This is not a request. This is a royal decree. Compliance is mandatory. Silence fell over the square. The kind of silence that happens when an entire village holds its breath at once. Then Vivian stepped forward and Morel's stomach dropped. Our household is honored to comply, Vivian said, her voice pitched to Carrie. Gracious, cooperative, the perfect subject. My daughter Isadora Ashford is the finest young woman in Asheville. Beautiful, educated, cultured. She would be a credit to any court. Isadora appeared as if on cue, stepping out of the house in a pale blue dress that matched her eyes. Hair perfect, posture perfect, smile perfect. She looked like every fairy tale princess Morel had ever heard about, like something made to be chosen. The lead rider looked at her. His eyes, vampire eyes, red as fresh blood, swept over Isadora with the clinical assessment of someone evaluating livestock. Step forward, he said. Isadora did, head high, confident. She knew how beautiful she was, knew her worth. The rider produced a small silver blade. Your hand. Isadora hesitated, just for a moment. Then she extended her right hand palm up. The rider made a quick, precise cut across her palm. Blood welled up red and ordinary. He watched it for 3 seconds. 5, 10. Then he released her hand and stepped back. Unsuitable. The word landed like a physical blow. Isadora's perfect smile cracked. Vivian's face went white. Unsuitable, Vivian's voice climbed an octave. That's impossible. My daughter is ordinary, the rider said flatly. Her blood carries no resonance, no power. The king requires... He paused, tilted his head. His red eyes swept the crowd, and stopped. On Morel, she'd been standing in the kitchen doorway, watching, not hiding exactly, but not drawing attention either, just being what she always was, present but unnoticed. Until now. The rider's eyes narrowed. He moved toward her with that same too smooth walk, and Morel's heart hammered against her ribs. You, he said, come here. She didn't want to. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to be anywhere else. But royal decrees weren't optional, and vampire riders didn't ask twice. She walked into the square on legs that felt like water. Up close, the rider was terrifying, tall, impossibly pale, beautiful in the way that predators are beautiful, perfect and deadly and wrong. His red eyes fixed on hers, and she saw his expression shift. Surprise. Silver eyes, he murmured. Then louder, give me your hand. She extended it, watched the blade come down, felt the sharp sting as it opened her palm. Blood welled up and began to glow. Not bright, not like a torch or a lamp. Just a faint, steady shimmer, like moonlight caught in liquid, like starlight made corporeal. Silver. The square went silent. Morel stared at her own blood, watching it gleam impossibly in the sunlight, and felt the bottom drop out of her world. The rider's hand closed around her wrist. Not hard, not painful, but absolutely certain. This one, he said to his companions. She's Sunblood. No, Vivian's voice cut through the shocked silence. No, she's just a servant, a charity case. My late husband's daughter from his first marriage. She's nobody. She's cursed. Look at her eyes. Her eyes, the writer said, still holding Morel's wrist, still watching her blood shimmer, are proof of what she is. Sunblood appears once in a generation, sometimes less. She comes with us. You can't, Vivian grabbed Morel's other arm. She's worthless. She's nothing. Take Isadora. Please, my daughter is beautiful, educated, worthy. Your daughter, the writer said quietly, is ordinary. This girl is rare, and His Majesty requires rare. He released Morel's wrist, looked at Vivian with those blood-red eyes. You have a choice. Send her willingly or we take her by force. Either way, she leaves with us. You have 10 minutes to gather her things. The world tilted. Morel stood there with blood running down her palm, silver and impossible, and watched Vivian's face cycle through emotions. Shock, anger, fear, calculation. Then Vivian smiled. It was the worst smile Morel had ever seen. Of course, Vivian said sweetly. Of course we'll comply. Morel, go pack your things. Quickly now. She pulled Morel aside, lowered her voice to a whisper that only Morel could hear. Finally, Vivian breathed. Finally, you're useful for something. Go to that castle. Be the vampire's plaything. At least then you'll be out of my house. The words should have hurt, should have cut deep. But Morel was numb, had been numb since her blood started glowing silver. Sunblood. She didn't know what it meant, didn't know why it mattered, didn't know anything except that in 10 minutes she was leaving the only home she'd ever known to become companion to a vampire king who wore a mask and ate alone in darkness. She packed quickly, one small bag, one change of clothes, the wooden bird carving her father had made for her 10th birthday. Nothing else in Vivian's house had ever been hers anyway. When she came back down, Isadora was waiting in the hallway. You think you're special now, Isadora hissed. You think this means something. But you're still nothing. You'll always be nothing. And when he realizes what a mistake he made, when he sends you back broken and used, don't expect me to take you in. Morel looked at her stepsister. Really looked, and saw something she'd never seen before. Fear. Isadora was afraid, not of the vampires, of Morel, of what this meant, of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the worthless cursed girl with the silver eyes was actually worth something after all. I won't be coming back, Morel said quietly. It was the truest thing she'd ever said. The journey to Shadowkeep Castle took 3 days and 3 nights. They rode through forests so thick the sunlight barely reached the ground, through valleys where morning mist clung to ancient stones like memories, through lands that grew progressively darker, quieter, stranger, as they moved deeper into vampire territory. The riders didn't speak to her, didn't explain, didn't answer questions, not that Morel asked any. She rode in silence, watching the world change around her, feeling the weight of her new reality settle into her bones. On the 3rd day, the forest thinned. The path began to climb, and there, rising from the ridge like something carved from darkness itself, was Shadowkeep Castle. It was enormous, impossibly vast, built from black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, its towers reaching toward a sky that looked perpetually twilight. Its walls thick enough to hold back armies, its gates tall enough that the riders didn't need to dismount to pass through. Morel stared up at it as they approached and felt something shift in her chest. Not fear exactly, something deeper, more serious. The bone-deep knowledge that her life had just changed direction permanently, irrevocably, and there was no going back. The gates opened with a sound like a long-held breath releasing. They rode through into a courtyard so large it could have held all of Asheville with room to spare. Servants moved through the space with quiet efficiency, human and vampire both working side by side in practiced silence. A woman waited near the main entrance, compact, practical, with short graying hair and a face that showed only what it chose to show. She wore simple dark clothing and a silver pin at her collar that marked her as senior staff. Morel of Asheville, the lead rider said, dismounting. Sunblood, brought for His Majesty's consideration. The woman's eyes swept over Morel, sharp, assessing, missing nothing. I'm Talia, she said. Her voice was neither warm nor cold, just direct. Head of household staff. You'll answer to me. Come. Morel dismounted on shaking legs. followed Talia through doors that were twice her height into a corridor lit by torches and iron brackets. The ceiling disappeared into shadow overhead. The floors were dark stone worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The air smelled of old wood and candle wax and something else. Something she couldn't name but recognized anyway. Power. This was a place where power lived, where it breathed and moved and watched. You'll have a room in the East Tower, Thalia said, leading her through a maze of corridors. Small but private. You'll eat with the other servants before dawn and after dusk. Your duties will be assigned tomorrow. For now, listen to the rules, all of them, because breaking them here doesn't end with a scolding. She stopped at a door, unlocked it, gestured Morel inside. The room was small as promised. A narrow bed, a chest for clothes, a single window that looked out over the eastern ridge toward forests that stretched to the horizon. But it was hers. For the first time in 6 years, Morel had a space that was entirely, completely hers. The rules, Talia said, and her voice carried a weight that made Morel turn away from the window. 1. You do not speak unless spoken to in the upper halls. 2. You do not make unnecessary sound. 3. You do not touch anything in the king's private chambers without direction. 4. You do not ask questions about the king, not to anyone, not ever. And 5. Thalia paused. Her expression shifted, became something harder, more serious. You do not look at the king's mask. You do not reach toward it. You do not speak of it. You do not react to it in any way that suggests you've noticed it at all. If you break this rule, you'll be removed from the castle, and Ashvale will face consequences I won't elaborate on. Morel's mouth went dry. I understand. Do you? Thalia searched her face. 792 years. That's how long he's worn the mask. No one living has seen his face. No one who's tried to change that has lived to tell about it. So when I say do not touch the mask, I mean it as a matter of survival. I understand, Morel repeated. Talia studied her for another moment, then nodded. Rest tonight. Tomorrow you work. Welcome to Shadowkeep, Morel of Ashvale. Try to stay alive. She left. The door closed, and Morel stood alone in her small room in a castle full of vampires 700 miles from anything familiar, with blood that glowed silver, and a king who no one had seen in 8 centuries. She should be terrified, should be crying, should be breaking down. Instead, she walked to the window, looked out at the endless, dark forest, at the twilight sky, at this strange new world that was hers now, whether she had chosen it or not. And for the first time in 6 years, Morel took a breath that didn't hurt. She wasn't invisible here, wasn't cursed, wasn't Vivian's charity case or Isidore's punching bag. Here she was Sunblood, rare, chosen. Here she could be something else. She just had to survive long enough to figure out what. The first week passed in a blur of new routines and careful observation. Morel learned the rhythm of Shadowkeep, the way you learn a new language through immersion and attention, and the gradual understanding that every place has its own logic, its own rules, its own way of breathing. She tended fires in the great halls, carried water from the lower wells to the upper chambers, swept corridors that seemed to stretch forever, learned which passages were used frequently and which were avoided, who spoke to whom and who didn't, where the silences gathered and what they meant. The castle was enormous, labyrinthine, built over centuries with wings and towers added by different rulers until it became less a single structure and more a city unto itself. There were sections for humans, sections for vampires, sections where both mingled freely, and sections the highest towers, the deepest chambers where only the king went and servants entered at their own risk. Morel kept her head down, worked quietly, made herself useful but not noticeable. It was the same strategy she'd used in Vivian's house, the same protective invisibility. Except here it didn't quite work, because she could feel eyes on her. Not constantly, not obviously, but in those small, careful moments when she'd turn and catch someone watching, a senior servant, a vampire guard. Thalia herself sometimes with that sharp, assessing gaze that seemed to see straight through carefully built walls. They knew she was Sunblood, knew she'd been brought here for a reason beyond fetching water and tending fires. They were waiting to see what would happen next. Morel was waiting too. She didn't see the king, not the first day or the second or the third. Started to wonder if she'd see him at all. Started to understand that Shadowkeep was so vast, the king so reclusive, that servants could work here their entire lives without ever being in the same room as him. It was on the 7th day that everything changed. She was in the council chamber, a long room with a massive stone table running down its center, carved chairs along both sides, and a fireplace at the far end large enough to stand inside. The fire had burned low during the night and needed building up before the council gathered at midday. Morel knelt in front of the hearth, feeding dry wood carefully into the coals, coaxing the heat back up. It was methodical work, soothing, the kind of task that let her mind wander while her hands stayed busy. She didn't hear the door open, didn't hear footsteps, just heard a voice, low, quiet, coming from somewhere behind and to her left. "You're building it incorrectly." Her hands stilled over the wood, just for a moment. One breath. Then she turned her head. He stood maybe 6 feet away, tall, broader than she'd measured from the sound alone, dressed in dark clothing that was plain for a king. No heavy decoration, no ceremonial furs, just dark cloth and worn leather, and the silver wolf emblem at his chest. And the mask, bone white, carved with intricate patterns she couldn't read from where she knelt, covering his face from brow to jaw, leaving only his eyes visible. Red vampire eyes, but different from the rider's eyes. Deeper, older, with something in them that made Morel think of winter and ancient things and the quiet before storms. He was looking directly at her, waiting. All the rules Talia had given her came flooding back. Don't stare, don't speak first, don't react to the mask. But he'd spoken, to her directly. And questions required answers, didn't they? "How should I build it?" she asked. Her voice came out steadier than she'd expected. Those red eyes behind the mask widened slightly. Surprise, she couldn't tell. Couldn't read expression from eyes alone. "The larger wood needs to go in from the sides," he said after a moment. "Not the front, or the draw won't pull correctly, and the room will fill with smoke before the council arrives." Morel looked at the fire, considered what he'd said. Then she rearranged the wood the way he'd described. The draw shifted immediately. The flames pulled upward with new steadiness. Heat spread outward from the hearth in a way it hadn't been doing before. "You're right," she said, not thinking about it, just stating fact. The silence that followed was very long. She realized in the middle of it what she'd done. Spoken first, responded without deference, looked at him, really looked, met those red eyes directly instead of keeping her gaze lowered the way she should have. Broken at least 3 rules, maybe more. She stayed where she was, hands resting on her knees, and she waited. She felt his attention on her, felt something in that looking that she couldn't name yet. Not anger, not the sharp, dominant heat of a powerful being who'd been disrespected. Something else, something quieter and more careful. Like whatever was behind those red eyes was paying attention in a way it didn't usually pay attention to things. After a long moment, he turned and walked back through the small door in the wall, the one servants used, the one she'd barely noticed, and it closed behind him with a sound like a quiet exhale. Morel was alone in the council chamber, with the fire burning correctly now, pulling steadily upward, filling the space with warmth. She stayed on her knees for a moment longer, breathing slowly. Then she went back to her work, because the fire still needed tending. And the council would arrive at midday, and she was a servant, and that was what servants did. But something had changed, something so small that no one else would have noticed it. She'd looked at the Vampire King, and he'd looked at her, and neither of them had looked away first. The fire incident changed something, not dramatically, not in any way that Morel could point to and say, "Look, here is where everything shifted." But in the days that followed, she became aware of a pattern. The king was watching her, not always, not obviously, but in those small, careful moments when she'd enter a room and find him already there, when she'd turn a corner in the upper halls and catch a glimpse of dark clothing disappearing around the next bend, when she'd be working in the evening, feeling the weight of attention on the back of her neck and know without looking that somewhere in the shadows red eyes were observing. It should have frightened her, should have made her nervous, jumpy, constantly looking over her shoulder. Instead, it made her curious, because the watching didn't feel predatory, didn't feel like the way Isadora used to watch her, looking for weaknesses, for opportunities to strike. This was different, more like the way you'd watch something you were trying to understand, something that didn't fit into the categories you'd already built. 2 weeks into her stay at Shadowkeep, on a quiet afternoon when her duties were light, Morel took a wrong turn in the West Wing. Or perhaps it wasn't wrong at all. Perhaps the castle itself guided her, as old buildings sometimes do, toward the places that need finding. She found herself in front of a door that was neither locked nor guarded, just slightly ajar, as if waiting. Inside, books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. More books than Morel had ever seen in her life, their spines creating a tapestry of leather and guilt and faded colors that spoke of centuries and knowledge and secrets kept in ink and paper. She should have turned around, should have left immediately. Servants didn't use the library. That was for nobility, for scholars, for people who had the right to take up space with their curiosity. But Morel had always loved books, and in Vivian's house, books had been forbidden. Too expensive, too fragile, too good for cursed girls with silver eyes. She stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Old paper, leather bindings, dust and time, and the particular scent that only libraries have, the accumulated breath of 1,000 stories all living together in the same space. She moved between the shelves like someone in a dream, trailing her fingers along spines, reading titles. Some were in languages she didn't recognize. Some were so old the words had faded to shadows. But some were readable, and those Morel pulled down carefully, reverently, and opened to random pages just to feel what it was like to hold knowledge in her hands. She was deep in the stacks reading about the history of the Night Realm when she heard footsteps. Panic spiked through her. She shouldn't be here. This was probably another rule she was breaking, another way to get herself sent away, or worse. But the footsteps didn't sound alarmed, just steady, unhurried. The king emerged from between two shelves, a book in his hand, and stopped when he saw her. They stared at each other. Morel held her book like a shield. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I got lost. I'll leave." "Do you read often?" he asked. The question surprised her enough that she answered honestly. "I used to, before, when my father was alive. He taught me, said knowledge was the only thing no one could take from you." "Wise man." The king moved closer, not crowding, just closing the distance enough to see the title of her book. The Chronicles of the Blood Wars, heavy reading for a first visit. "I wanted to understand," Morel said, "where I am, what this place is, who—" She stopped herself. "Who I am." He finished the sentence for her. There was something in his voice, not quite amusement, but not displeasure either. She met his eyes, those red vampire eyes that she was learning to read despite the mask that hid everything else. "Yes," she admitted. He was quiet for a moment. Then he held out the book he'd been carrying. "Try this one instead. The Chronicles get the facts right, but miss the truth. This," he gestured to his book, "is more honest, less comfortable, but honest." She took it. Their fingers brushed. For just a second, just long enough for her to register that his skin was cool, but not cold. That he was solid and real beneath all the rumors and the mask and the 800 years. The book was bound in dark leather, worn smooth from handling. No title on the spine. When she opened it, she saw handwriting. A journal. "Who's my mother's?" he said quietly. "Isolde Corvus." She kept extensive records. About the kingdom, about the bloodlines, about— He paused. "About many things. You can read it, if you want to understand." Morel looked down at the journal, then back up at him. "Why?" The question came out barely above a whisper. "Why would you let me read something so personal?" Behind the mask, his red eyes were very steady. "Because you asked honestly. Because you want to understand, not to use. And because—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider. "Because my mother would have liked you. She valued curiosity over obedience, courage over compliance. You remind me of her, the way you look at things, like you're carefully observing what others overlook." The words settled into Morel's chest like warm stones. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once, then turned and walked back through the stacks, leaving her alone with his mother's journal and the strange, impossible warmth spreading through her ribs. She stayed in the library for hours that evening, reading, learning, and beginning to understand exactly what she'd been brought here to do. The journal was written in elegant script, each word carefully formed. Isolde Corvus had been methodical in her record-keeping. Dates, events, observations about court politics and territorial disputes, and the complicated dance of power that kept the Night Realm functioning. But scattered throughout were personal entries, moments when the Queen's voice came through clear and human and achingly familiar. Morel read them in her small room after her duties were finished by candlelight that made the words seem to flicker and breathe. Entry from 300 years ago. Lucian turned 100 today, still so young, still learning what it means to carry this crown. I see his father in him, the strength, the strategic mind, the ability to command with a single look. But I see myself there too, in the way he watches things, the way he notices details others miss, the way he stands at the window and stares out at the forest like he's trying to memorize it, trying to hold on to something real in all this ceremonial performance. The mask weighs on him. Some days I see him reach for it without thinking, fingers going to the edge, like he wants to remove it, but can't quite remember how. Other days he wears it so naturally I forget there's a face beneath it at all. I should never have agreed to this. Should never have let Aldrich convince me it was necessary. But the curse was spreading, and we were running out of options, and the mask was the only thing that slowed it down. Slowed, not stopped. That's the word I can't say out loud. The mask doesn't cure, it only delays. And every year the curse grows stronger underneath, and I watch my son become more isolated, more alone, and I know that one day it will break through. Unless we find the cure, unless the prophecy is true, unless the girl with silver eyes comes like the old text promised. And I'm not here to see it because this sickness in my blood is moving fast now, and time is running out for both of us. Morel's hands trembled as she turned the page. Entry from 290 years ago in shakier handwriting. I'm dying. The healers say weeks, maybe days. Lucian doesn't know yet. I've hidden it well. But I need to write this down. Need to leave him something beyond instructions and protocol. The curse that marks our bloodline is ancient. Older than the Night Realm. Older than vampire kind itself. It was born from dark magic and desperation, and it passes from parent to child like a poison in the blood. The mask suppresses it, holds it at bay, but it cannot cure. Only Sunblood can cure. I've spent decades researching, following leads, tracing bloodlines. Sunblood appears once in a generation at most. Sometimes centuries pass without a single instance. But when it appears, it's unmistakable. Silver eyes, blood that glows like captured moonlight. A presence that calms even the wildest creatures. The girl with these gifts will come. I know it the way I know my own heartbeat. She'll come when the curse is at its worst, when Lucian needs her most. And when she comes, he must not waste her. Must not treat her as just a cure to be consumed. Because Sunblood is rare for a reason. It's not just healing, it's transformation. And transformation requires connection, requires trust, requires love. That's the word I'm afraid to write. Because if I write it, if I make it real, then I'm asking my son to risk the one thing he's never risked. The one thing the mask has protected him from all these years. His heart. But the cure won't work without it. That's what the old texts say. What my research confirms. Sunblood willingly given in an act of love will break the curse. Sunblood taken by force will only spread it. So I'm writing this for you, my son. For when you find her, don't hide behind the mask. Don't retreat into isolation. Let her see you. Let yourself be seen. It might kill you, but staying as you are will definitely kill you. And I would rather you die trying to live than spend eternity just surviving. The entry ended there. The next page was torn out. The page after that was blank. Morel closed the journal, set it on her small table, stared at the candle flame until her vision blurred. She was the girl. The one with silver eyes, the one Isolde had written about 300 years ago. She was the cure. And Lucian knew, had known from the moment the writers found her, had brought her here with full knowledge of what she was, what she could do. The question was, did he know what it would cost? Did he know it required love? 3 days later, Morel was carrying water up to the 3rd floor when she heard voices in the room. Low and as tense. She shouldn't have stopped. Should have kept moving, kept invisible. But one of the voices belonged to the king, and Morel had learned that his voice carried a particular quality when he was displeased. A cold, quiet edge that made even the bravest vampires go still. Cannot afford to show weakness, another voice was saying, male, older, heavy with authority. The northern territories are already questioning your isolation. Lord Marcus sends word weekly asking when you'll appear at court. When I'll what? The king's voice cut through like a blade. Remove the mask, show them what they want to see, and then what, Cassian? What happens when they realize the truth? My lord, I only mean. I know what you mean. The answer is no. The mask stays. The isolation continues. And if Lord Marcus has questions, he can bring them to me directly instead of whispering to my counsel behind closed doors. Silence. Then footsteps. Coming toward the corridor where Morel stood frozen with her water buckets. She moved. Fast. Into the nearest alcove, pressing herself against the stone wall, trying to make herself small. Invisible. Not there. The king walked past her hiding place. Didn't slow, didn't turn his head. But just as he passed the alcove, he said quietly, "You're not as invisible as you think you are, Morel of Ashvale," and kept walking. Her heart hammered. She waited until his footsteps faded, until the corridor was silent again. Then she picked up her buckets and continued to the third floor, her hands shaking just slightly, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. He knew her name, not just the Sunblood girl or the servant, her actual name. That shouldn't matter, shouldn't mean anything, but it did. She saw him the next evening in the East Gallery, not by accident this time. She'd been waiting, hoping. He stood by the windows looking out at the forest below. The twilight made his silhouette look like something carved from shadow. "You read it," he said without turning around. Not a question. "Yes. All of it. Enough." He turned then. Those red eyes found hers across the gallery. "And now you have questions." "Just one," Morel said. "Did you bring me here to use me or to save you?" The silence stretched. Somewhere in the castle below, a bell told the evening hour. "Both," he said finally. "At first, when the writers identified your blood, when I saw the test results, I thought, here. Finally, after 8 centuries, the cure." He moved away from the window, closer, not quite into her space, but close enough that she could see the details of the mask, the carved patterns, the way it sat against his face like a second skin. "But then you arrived, and you looked at me without fear, without calculation, just looked. And I realized I'd spent so long being the king, the untouchable, the isolated, the one behind the mask, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to truly be acknowledged as just a person." "You are a person," Morel said quietly. "Am I—" Something in his voice cracked. "Not much, just enough. I haven't felt like one in a very long time. I eat alone, I walk alone, I rule alone." And the mask, he reached up, touched the edge of it with his fingertips. "The mask keeps me safe, keeps the curse contained, keeps everyone at exactly the right distance. And that's what you want, distance. It's what I need." He dropped his hand. "The curse is getting worse. Every full moon it spreads further. Every year I lose a little more control. The mask holds it back, but it's not enough anymore. Soon," he stopped, "soon it won't matter. I'll either break completely or I'll spend the rest of eternity in stasis, half alive, half cursed, never fully either." Morel's chest ached. "Your mother wrote that the cure requires love, sunblood willingly given. Did you know that part?" "Yes." "And you still brought me here." He looked at her for a long moment. "I brought you here because you're the only chance I have. But I won't force you, won't manipulate you, won't pretend to feel something I don't to get what I need. If there's going to be a cure, it has to be real. It has to be chosen. By both of us." "And if I choose not to give it?" Morel asked. "If I say no, I won't sacrifice myself for a king I barely know." "Then you say no, and I'll make sure you're returned safely to Ashvale with enough coin to start whatever life you want. Far from Vivian, far from everything that hurt you." The offer hung in the air between them, genuine, without strings. Morel realized suddenly that he meant it, that he would let her go, even if it cost him everything. "I'm not saying no," she said softly. His eyes widened slightly behind the mask. "I'm not saying yes either," she continued. "I'm saying I need time, to understand, to decide. Is that allowed?" "It's more than allowed," he said. "It's the only thing I'd accept." They stood there in the gallery as twilight deepened into night and something passed between them. Not quite trust, not quite understanding, but the beginning of both. The foundation of something that might, with time and care and courage, become real. The wolf appeared in the courtyard 4 days later, a massive gray beast with amber eyes and a limp that spoke of serious injury. It had wandered through the gates, somehow past the guards, past the wards, and now stood in the center of the yard making low-pain sounds that carried up to where Morel was working in the third-floor hall. She heard the commotion before she saw it. Shouts, running footsteps, the distinctive sound of steel being drawn from sheaths. By the time she reached the courtyard, a dozen guards had surrounded the wolf. Weapons drawn, ready to kill. "It's injured," someone was saying. "Probably rabid. Best to put it down before—" "No." The word left Morel's mouth before she could stop it. Loud, clear, carrying across the courtyard with more authority than a servant had any right to possess. Everyone turned to stare at her. She should back down, should apologize, should remember her place. Instead, she walked forward, through the ring of guards, into the space where the wolf stood bleeding and afraid. "Morel, get back," Thalia's voice, sharp with concern. But Morel wasn't listening. She was watching the wolf, seeing the way its ears flattened, the way its body tensed, the way pain and fear combined to make it dangerous, yes, but also desperate. She knelt slowly, extended her hand. Hey, she said softly. Hey, it's okay. I know it hurts. I know you were scared, but I'm not going to hurt you. The wolf's lips pulled back from its teeth. A warning growl rumbled in its chest. Morel stayed still, kept her hand extended, kept her voice low and steady. I can help if you let me, if you trust me for just a minute. She could feel the guards watching, could feel the tension in the air, could feel how badly this could go if the wolf decided to attack. But she could also feel something else. That same warmth that had flooded through her when she'd healed the bird. That same sense of connection, of recognition of something in her blood responding to something in the creature before her. The wolf's growl faded. Its ears came forward, and slowly, carefully, it lowered its head toward her outstretched hand. She touched its muzzle, felt the soft fur, the heat of breath against her palm, and then the warmth came. It started in her chest, spread down her arms, flowed through her fingertips into the wolf, and she felt the injury in her own body like an echo. Torn muscle, cracked ribs, deep tissue damage from a fall or a fight or both. She let the warmth flow, let it pour out of her into the wolf, and she felt the healing happen in real time. Felt the muscle knit together. Felt the ribs settle back into place. Felt the pain recede like tide going out. The wolf's eyes widened. It made a soft sound, not quite a whimper, not quite a sigh, just acknowledgement. Then it licked her hand once, turned, and walked out of the courtyard with no trace of the limp that had brought it there. Morel knelt in the dust, breathing hard, her hands shaking from the effort. The courtyard was absolutely silent. Then a voice. His voice. Remarkable. She looked up. The king stood in the archway, backlit by the light from the hall. He'd been watching. She didn't know for how long. He walked forward, stopped in front of her, extended his hand. She took it, let him pull her to her feet. His grip was strong, certain. His red eyes were fixed on hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. You healed it, he said, completely, without tools, without magic words or ritual. Just, he gestured at her hands. You. I don't know how it works, Morel admitted. It happens. When something's in pain. When I want to help. Sunblood, he said quietly. It's not just rare. It's powerful. Do you understand what you just did should be impossible? Even the strongest healers in the realm need hours of ritual to mend a broken rib. You did it in seconds. Morel looked at her hands. They'd stopped shaking. Is that what the cure requires, power? No. His voice was very soft. It requires heart. The power is just proof that you have one. Behind them, the guards were dispersing. Talia was shooing people back to work. But Morel barely noticed. She was too busy watching the way the king looked at her. Like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. Like she was something precious, invaluable, and terrifying all at once. Like she mattered. I need to tell you something, he said. Will you come with me? It wasn't really a question, but he asked it like one anyway. Like she had a choice. She nodded. They walked. He led her through the castle. Not to the ramparts this time, but to a different place. A walled garden she hadn't known existed, hidden in the heart of Shadowkeep. Stone paths wound between raised beds where herbs and night-blooming flowers grew in the eternal twilight. A fountain stood at the center, water trickling softly over dark stone. My mother made this, he said, when she was still well enough. She said every castle needed a place of peace, somewhere quiet to think. They walked the paths together, and he spoke. The curse takes things, he said, slowly. First it was taste. Food became ash in my mouth. Then smell. Then the ability to feel warmth. Now I can barely remember what the sun feels like on skin, what fresh bread smells like, what it means to be warm. He stopped by the fountain, trailing his fingers through the water. The mask holds the curse back, but it holds me back too, from life, from feeling, from being fully present in my own existence. I've been surviving for so long, I forgot what living was. Morel moved to stand beside him, close enough to touch if either of them reached out, close enough to feel the cold radiating from his body, not natural cold, but the absence of warmth that came with the curse. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you deserve to know what you'd be saving, who you'd be saving. Not just the king, not just some political necessity, but, he turned to face her, a person who's been alone for 800 years, who's forgotten what connection feels like, who's spent so long behind this mask that some days I can't remember if there's still a face underneath it at all. His hand came up, touched the edge of the mask. If you give me your blood, if you choose to break this curse, You should know what you're getting. Not some fairy tale king, just someone broken, someone who might not even remember how to be whole anymore. Morel looked at him, really looked, at the mask that hid everything, at the red eyes that revealed more than he probably realized, at the way he stood strong and regal and utterly completely alone. She thought about Vivian, about being invisible, about spending years being told she was worthless, cursed nothing. And she thought about this king who'd been told the same thing in a different way, that his face was weakness, that his humanity was danger, that who he was beneath the mask was something to hide. I don't think you're broken, she said quietly. I think you're exactly what anyone would be after 8 centuries of isolation. Human. I'm a vampire. You're both. And the vampire part might not feel warmth anymore, might not taste food, might not smell roses. But the human part, she gestured at him, the human part brought me to your library, let me read your mother's journal, made this garden so your mother would have peace. That part isn't broken. It's just been hiding for a really long time. He was very still, absolutely motionless in that way vampires could be when they forgot to mimic breathing. I shouldn't have told you, he said finally, about the curse, about what the mask does. It's not fair to you. You're already dealing with enough. What I'm dealing with, Morel said, is the fact that for the first time in 6 years, someone is treating me like a person instead of a problem. Someone is asking what I want instead of telling me what I should be. And yes, there's this whole curse thing. And yes, apparently my blood can save you. But also, she stopped, swallowed, found her courage. Also, I like talking to you. I like that you let me use your library. I like that you correct my fire building technique and show me your mother's garden and tell me things you probably shouldn't. I like that you make me feel valued. The wind rustled through the night blooming flowers. The fountain trickled softly. Morel, I'm not promising anything, she said quickly. I'm not saying I love you or that I'll save you or that this is some grand romance. I'm saying I want to keep talking to you, keep learning about you, keep being valued. And maybe at the end of all that, I'll know if what I feel is real enough to risk my life for. She held his gaze, didn't look away. Is that allowed, Dao? She asked. In whatever this is we're doing. Behind the mask, his red eyes burned. It's more than allowed, he said softly. It's the only thing I want. They stood in the garden as night deepened around them, and for the first time in 800 years, Lucian Corvus didn't face the darkness alone. Vivian and Isidore arrived on a cold morning 6 days later, accompanied by a royal escort and enough luggage to suggest they planned an extended stay. Morel was in the kitchens when word came, carrying supplies, staying invisible. Honored guests, Thalia said, reading from the message. Her tone was flat, unimpressed. The stepmother and stepsister of our Sunblood candidate, here to witness the blood moon ceremony. They're to be given rooms in the south wing and treated with all courtesy due to family of a potential queen. The words hit Morel like cold water. Family. Potential queen. She wasn't either of those things. Not really. But Vivian had found a way to insert herself anyway. Had found an angle. Because Vivian always found an angle. Morel, Talia's voice was gentle. You don't have to see them. I can make excuses. No. Morel set down the supplies, straightened her spine. If they're here, they're here. I won't hide. But her hands were shaking. That night, there was a formal dinner in the Great Hall. All the senior staff, the King's Council, and the honored guests, Morel was required to attend, to serve, to be present but invisible while Vivian and Isidora performed. And perform they did. Vivian wore emerald silk that matched her eyes. Isidora wore pale blue that made her look like something from a painting. They sat at the high table laughing at the right moments, smiling at the right people, being charming and cultured and everything that high society valued. Morel wore her servant's clothing, carried wine, refilled glasses, stayed invisible, until Vivian saw her. Oh, Vivian's voice carried across the hall. Sweet, delighted. Morel, darling, how wonderful to see you looking so well. Castle life clearly agrees with you. Every head turned, every eye found Morel standing there with the wine pitcher face burning. Come, come, Vivian gestured. Don't be shy. We're family after all. Tell everyone how grateful you are, how this opportunity has changed your life. It was a trap, every word a trap. Look how gracious I am. Look how I elevate this poor creature. See how she should be grateful. Morel's fingers tightened on the pitcher. She could feel the king watching from his place at the head of the table, could feel the weight of his attention even without looking. "I am grateful," she said quietly, "for the opportunity to serve. And we're so proud," Vivian continued, standing now, crossing to Morel. "Aren't we, Isadora, so proud that our little Morel has made something of herself, even with her, well." She waved a hand dismissively. "We don't speak of such things in polite company." Code. For cursed, for silver eyes, for all the things Vivian had spent 6 years telling Morel were wrong with her. "Of course," Isadora added, also standing. "We always knew she had potential. Buried deep, of course, but there. If one looked hard enough." They flanked her, both smiling, both perfect, both making Morel feel exactly as small as they'd always made her feel. And then Vivian reached out, adjusted Morel's collar, a gesture that looked caring to anyone watching. But her fingers dug in, just slightly, just enough. "Don't forget where you came from," she whispered, too low for anyone else to hear. "Don't forget what you are, a servant, playing at being special. But we both know the truth." The pitcher trembled in Morel's hands. "That's enough." The king's voice cut through the hall, not loud, not shouting, just absolute. Everyone went silent. He stood, moved down from the high table, crossed the hall with that unhurried, predatory grace that reminded everyone exactly what he was. He stopped beside Morel, looked at Vivian. "I'm certain," he said quietly, "that wasn't meant to sound like criticism of a member of my household. Was it, Lady Ashford?" Vivian's smile didn't falter, but something in her eyes flickered. "Of course not, Your Majesty. Simply familial affection." "How fortunate for Morel," the king said. His tone was perfectly polite, perfectly cold. "To have such devoted family. I'm sure she appreciates your concern." He turned to Morel, held out his hand. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. She set down the pitcher, took his hand, let him lead her out of the great hall away from Vivian and Isadora and all the staring eyes into the corridor beyond. They walked in silence until the sounds of the dinner faded, until it was just them in the torchlit hallway. "I apologize," he said. "I should have warned you they were coming. Should have given you time to prepare." "How do you prepare for that?" Morel asked. Her voice shook slightly. "For people who make you feel worthless by pretending to care." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "You don't," he said. "You survive it. And then you remember that their opinion of you has nothing to do with your actual worth. They see what they want to see, what makes them feel superior. But that's not truth. That's just cruelty in pretty clothing." Morel looked up at him, at the mask that hid everything, at the eyes that showed more than they should. "You saw," she whispered, "what she did, what they both did." "I see everything," he said quietly, "especially the things people try to hide. Your stepmother is skilled at performing benevolence. But I've been reading people for 800 years. I know cruelty when I see it, even when it smiles." Something in Morel's chest cracked open. Not breaking, just opening, letting light in. "Thank you," she said, "for noticing, for," her voice caught, "for not pretending it didn't happen." He reached up, hesitated, then very gently, very carefully touched her shoulder. Just briefly, just enough to ground her. "You are not worthless," he said. "You are not cursed. You are invaluable. And anyone who can't recognize that is either blind or threatened. My guess is your stepmother is both." Morel felt tears prick her eyes, fought them back. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted. "The dinner, the ceremony, all of it. I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You healed a dying wolf in seconds," he said. "You survived 6 years with people who tried to make you invisible. You're standing here now after everything still looking at me without fear. You're stronger than you know." He dropped his hand, stepped back. "But if it's too much, if you want to leave." "I meant what I said before. You can go, tonight if you want. I'll see you safe." Morel shook her head. "I don't want to leave." "Then stay," he said. His voice carried an edge now, steel beneath the gentleness. "And know this, your stepmother will not torment you again. Not in my castle, not under my watch. She's here because refusing entry to family would cause political complications. But she will show you respect. Or she will face consequences that go far beyond simple dismissal." The promise in his words wrapped around Morel like armor. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay," he repeated. They stood in the corridor as the dinner continued without them, and Morel realized with startling clarity that she was starting to care about this vampire king who noticed cruelty and defended the defenseless and made her feel like she mattered. Starting to care in a way that felt dangerous, in a way that felt real, in a way that might just maybe be enough to break a curse, if she was brave enough to let it. The announcement came the next morning, delivered by Cassian in the Great Hall, with all the ceremony and weight befitting a royal proclamation. By decree of His Majesty, Lucien Corvus, King of the Night Realm, on the night of the blood moon, 3 days hence, trial shall be held to determine the king's chosen companion. All candidates of suitable age and bloodline are invited to participate. The trials will test heart courage and truth. May the worthy prevail. The hall erupted into whispers, speculation, nervous energy that crackled through the assembled crowd like lightning before a storm. Morel stood near the back, heart pounding, as Vivienne's hand clamped onto her shoulder. "Well," Vivienne murmured, voice dripping false sweetness. "How exciting, a chance to prove yourself, dear Morel. Though I do hope you won't embarrass the family. Isadora, of course, will be competing as well. Properly trained, properly prepared, not like some who've only just learned which fork to use." Isadora smiled from beside her mother, that same cruel smile Morel had endured for 6 years. "I'm sure Morel will do her best," Isadora said. "Though best and good enough aren't always the same thing, are they?" They drifted away, leaving Morel standing alone in the crowd, feeling exactly as small as they'd intended. But then a presence materialized beside her. Warm, solid, real. "Thalia." "Ignore them," the older woman said quietly. "They're performing, trying to rattle you. Don't give them the satisfaction." "What if they're right?" Morel whispered. "What if I can't?" "You healed a wolf in seconds," Thalia interrupted. "You survived 6 years in that woman's house. You looked the vampire king in the eyes and didn't flinch. You're stronger than you think. Now prove it." The first trial was held in the castle courtyard at sunset, with torches burning in a great circle and half the realm watching from the walls and windows above. 7 candidates stood in the center. Isadora in pale silk that caught the dying light. 3 vampire nobles in their house colors. 2 human girls from prominent families. And Morel in simple, dark clothing, feeling desperately out of place. Cassian stood at the edge of the circle, reading from a scroll. "The first trial tests the heart. A creature will be brought before you injured and afraid. Whoever can heal it, truly heal it, not simply calm, it will prove themselves worthy of the king's consideration." A ripple of unease moved through the candidates. Healing required magic. Real magic, the kind most people didn't possess. The guards brought out a stag. Magnificent once, probably. Now broken. One leg bent wrong, ribs visible through matted fur, eyes wild with pain and terror. It fought the chains, thrashed, made sounds that tore at Morel's heart. "Begin," Cassian said. The vampire nobles tried first, chanting in old languages, weaving symbols in the air, pouring their power into elaborate rituals that made the torches flare and the air crackle. Nothing happened. The human girls tried next. One had brought herbs, the other had healing crystals. Both approached carefully, methodically, doing everything by the book. The stag just screamed louder. Then Isadora stepped forward. She'd prepared for this. Morel could tell. Had probably been coaching with healers for weeks. She moved with confidence, speaking soothingly, extending her hand just so. The stag calmed slightly, stopped thrashing quite so hard. The crowd murmured approval. Vivienne beamed from her place on the viewing platform. But the leg stayed broken. The ribs stayed cracked. Isadora had calmed it, but she hadn't healed it. She stepped back, frustration flickering across her perfect face. "Next candidate," Cassian called. Every eye turned to Morel. She didn't want to do this. Didn't want to perform. Didn't want to expose what she could do in front of hundreds of strangers. But the stag was suffering, and she'd never been able to walk away from suffering. She moved into the center of the circle, ignored the whispers, ignored Vivienne's sharp intake of breath, ignored everything except the terrified creature in front of her. She knelt in the dirt, extended her hand, palm up, open. "Hey," she whispered. I know it hurts, but I can help, if you'll let me." The stag's wild eyes found hers, and something passed between them. That same recognition she'd felt with the wolf, with the bird, that wordless understanding that lived deeper than language. The stag lowered its head. Morel touched its muzzle, felt the soft fur, the rapid heartbeat, the pain radiating through its broken body, and let the warmth come. It poured out of her in a wave of silver light, visible this time unmistakable, flooding through her hands into the stag. She felt the bones shift, felt them knit together with a sensation like puzzle pieces finding their place. felt the ribs heal, felt the fear drain away as pain receded. The stag stood, whole, healed. It looked at her once with clear, calm eyes. Then the guards released the chains and it bounded away into the forest beyond the walls. The courtyard was absolutely silent. Then someone started clapping. Slow, deliberate. Lord Marcus stepped forward from the viewing platform. A vampire noble Morel had seen at council meetings. Tall, dark-haired, with eyes that calculated constantly. Remarkable, he said, voice carrying. The girl is Sunblood, just as the rumors said. How fortunate for His Majesty to have such a convenient cure delivered right to his doorstep. The word cure rippled through the crowd like poison. A cure, someone whispered. For what? The king's curse. I heard Sunblood can break curses. So that's why she's really here. Marcus smiled, sharp, knowing. Tell me, girl, did the king inform you of your purpose? That your rare blood is the only thing standing between him and complete feral transformation? That you weren't chosen for your heart or your character, but for what you can provide? The accusation hung in the air. Morel stood slowly, silver light still dancing on her fingertips, every eye in the courtyard fixed on her. Oh yes, she said clearly. He told me. Gasps, murmurs, shock radiating outward. He told me everything about it, she continued, voice steady despite her racing heart. About the curse, about Sunblood, about what it could cost me. And then he said I could leave, that he wouldn't force me, that it had to be my choice. She looked up at the high tower where she knew the king was watching. So yes, Lord Marcus, I know why I'm here. I know what I am, and I'm choosing to stay anyway. The murmur shifted, changed tone, became something else. Marcus's smile faltered, but before he could respond, Vivian stood from her seat. How noble, she called out, voice dripping false admiration. Our brave Morel, sacrificing herself for a king she barely knows. Though one must wonder, is it truly sacrifice when you're getting so much in return? A title, a crown, escape from your unfortunate circumstances. She descended the steps, crossing toward Morel with practiced grace. Tell me, dear, have you informed His Majesty about your other gifts, the way animals die around you sometimes, the accidents that follow? Wherever you go, we called you cursed for a reason. It was a lie, a complete fabrication, but delivered with such conviction, such certainty, that doubt rippled through the watching crowd. Morel's hands clenched into fists. That's not true. Isn't it? Vivian's eyes were cold despite her smile. Shall I tell them about your father? How he sickened and died so suddenly after you turned 13? How the healer said it was unnatural? How I tried to protect you from the accusations, but people talked. Stop. The word came out harder than Morel intended. Louder. Stop lying. Lying. Vivian's hand flew to her chest, wounded, shocked. I raised you, cared for you, and this is how you repay me, with accusations. The crowd was turning. Morel could feel it, could feel sympathy shifting toward Vivian, doubt creeping in about the cursed girl with silver eyes who could heal but might also kill. She opened her mouth to defend herself, to fight back, but a voice cut through the courtyard like a blade through silk. That is enough. The king stood on the ramparts above, backlit by the setting sun, magnificent, terrible, radiating authority that made every vampire in the courtyard straighten instinctively. Lady Ashford, he said, voice carrying without shouting, your concern for your stepdaughter is noted, as are your fabrications. I have access to the death records from Ashvale. Your husband died of heart failure, natural, documented by 3 separate healers. There was no curse, no mystery, just a convenient story you've been using to control a girl who deserved better. Vivian's face went white, then red. Your Majesty, I would never, wouldn't you, on? He descended the stairs, moved across the courtyard with that predatory grace. You've been spreading poison since you arrived, undermining, manipulating, attempting to elevate your daughter while crushing the girl under your care. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think 800 years of reading people wouldn't show me exactly what you are? He stopped in front of Vivian, looked down at her with those red eyes that missed nothing. I will tolerate your presence in this castle for the sake of political propriety. Family of a candidate cannot be turned away without cause. But hear this clearly. His voice dropped, became something colder, more dangerous. If you speak one more lie about Morel, if you undermine her again, if you cause her one more moment of pain, you will learn exactly what happens to those who harm what I protect. Am I understood? The threat beneath the words was unmistakable. Vivian's carefully constructed mask cracked. Fear showed through. "Yes, your majesty," she whispered. "Good." He turned to Morel, extended his hand. "Come." She took it, let him lead her away from the staring crowd into the castle to the garden where they'd talked before. "Thank you," she whispered when they were alone. "Don't thank me," he said. "I should have protected you better. Should have anticipated." "You did protect me," Morel interrupted. "You saw what she was doing. You stopped it. You made sure everyone knew the truth. That's more than anyone's ever done for me." He reached up, hesitated, then very gently cupped her face in his hands. "You are not cursed," he said. "You are not worthless. You are one of the rarest, most precious people I have ever encountered, and I will not stand by while anyone tries to convince you otherwise." Morel felt tears slip down her cheeks. "The trial isn't over. There's still the second one. Courage." "Are you afraid?" "Terrified," she admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway." He smiled behind the mask. She could see it in his eyes. "That's what courage is," he said softly, "being afraid and choosing to face it regardless." The second trial was held at midnight in the castle's deepest chamber, a room carved from black stone and lit by blue flame that cast everything in eerie shifting shadows. Only 3 candidates remained. The vampire nobles had withdrawn. The human girls had declined. It was just Morel Isadora and one vampire lady who'd proven herself in the first trial. Cassian stood at the chamber's entrance. "The second trial tests courage," he announced. "You will enter the chamber of truth. Inside, you will face your deepest fear. The illusion will feel real. The terror will be genuine. Those who break will be brought out. Those who face their fear and survive will proceed." He gestured to the door. "Who enters first?" Isadora stepped forward immediately. Head high, confident, she entered the chamber. The door sealed behind her. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then screaming, high, refinement, genuine. The door opened. Isadora stumbled out, makeup smeared hair, wild sobbing. "Spiders," she gasped. "Everywhere. Oh God." She collapsed. 2 servants carried her away. The vampire lady went next. Lasted 7 minutes before the screaming started. Came out shaking pale even for a vampire unable to speak. Then it was Morel's turn. She stepped into the chamber. The door sealed. Darkness. Complete. Total. The kind of darkness that felt alive. Then light. Slowly. Building. And she was back in Vivienne's house, in the kitchen, on her knees, scrubbing the same stone floor she'd scrubbed 1,000 times. "Morel," Vivienne's voice. Behind her. She turned. Vivienne stood there, but wrong, distorted, her face shifting, becoming something else, something monstrous. "You think you can escape?" Vivienne's voice was layered, multiple tones like a chorus of accusations. "You think being Sunblood makes you special? You think that Vampire King cares about you?" The kitchen dissolved, reformed. Now they were in the great hall, but it was empty, cold, dead. "He's using you," Vivienne's voice echoed. "He'll take your blood, your life, and then forget you ever existed. Because that's what you are. Forgettable. Worthless. Cursed." The fear crashed over Morel in waves. Not fear of spiders or heights or simple phobias. Fear of the truth. Fear that Vivienne was right, that she was nothing, that she'd die meaningless and alone and forgotten. Fear of invisibility. It was suffocating. She sank to her knees in the empty hall, gasping, feeling the terror wrap around her throat like hands. This was her fear. Not monsters, not death. Being unseen, unvalued, dying without ever mattering to anyone. The fear swallowed her, pulled her down into darkness where nothing existed except the certainty that she was alone and always would be. But then a memory, the king's voice in the garden, in the library, in a dozen quiet moments. "You are invaluable. You're stronger than you know. You are not worthless." And her own voice responding, growing stronger. "I don't think you're broken. I think you're human. I like that you make me feel valued. I want to keep being valued." The fear was real. The terror was genuine. But so was the connection. So was the caring. So was the fact that for the first time in her life, someone had looked at her and recognized worth. Morel stood. "No," she said to this darkness, to Vivienne's voice, to the fear itself. "You're wrong. I matter. Not because of what I can give, not because of my blood, but because I choose to matter. Because I'm brave enough to believe I deserve to be valued." The darkness shattered. Light flooded in. She was standing in the real chamber. Cassian watching. The door opened. She'd faced her fear, and she'd won. Cassian declared her the trial's victor. The realm celebrated. Preparations began for the Blood Moon ceremony tomorrow night. But Morel couldn't celebrate, because she'd realized something in that chamber. Something true and terrifying. She was in love with the Vampire King, not because he needed her, not because of the curse or the trials or any of it, but because he'd recognized her worth. Really recognized it. And in being valued, she'd learned to value herself. That night, she went to his chambers, knocked on the heavy wooden door. "Enter," his voice called. She pushed the door open. He stood by the fireplace, mask in place, looking into the flames. "Morel," he said, "you won. You—" He turned, saw her expression, stopped. "What's wrong? I need to ask you something," she said, "and I need you to answer honestly." "Always." She moved closer, close enough to see the details of the mask, the carved patterns, the way it sat against his face like a prison. "When you brought me here," she said, "when the riders found me and you knew what my blood could do, did you plan to use me to take what you needed and let me die?" He went absolutely still. "Yes," he said quietly. "At first, when I was desperate, when the curse was spreading faster than I could control. I thought, here, finally, a cure. And if it cost one human life to save the realm from a feral vampire king, wasn't that worth it?" The honesty cut, but she'd asked for it. "What changed?" she whispered. "You did." He moved closer. "You looked at me without fear. You asked questions. You healed that wolf in the courtyard, and the light in your eyes when it ran away free, it was so genuine. And I realized I was willing to sacrifice someone who possessed more humanity in one moment than I'd managed in 8 centuries." He reached up, touched the mask. "You made me remember what it felt like to want to live. Not just survive, actually live. Feel things. Care about something beyond duty. And curse. And endless isolation." "I love you," Morel said. The words fell into the space between them like stones in still water. His hand froze on the mask. "Morel, I know it's fast," she said. "I know it's complicated. I know there's a curse and a ceremony and 1,000 reasons this is insane, but I love you, not because you're king, not because of what you can give me, but because you're kind and lonely and brave enough to be honest about being broken." She stepped closer, close enough to touch. "And I want to save you, not because I have to, not because it's duty, but because a world without you in it would be dimmer. And I've spent enough time in darkness." He stared at her, red eyes wide behind the mask. "If you give me your blood," he said slowly, "the ritual requires, according to my mother's research, willing sacrifice in an act of love. True love, not convenience, not gratitude, real love. And if it's not real, if there's any doubt, the curse will spread to you instead of breaking. You'll die, and I'll have killed the only person who's made me feel human in 800 years. "Do you love me?" Morel asked. "More than I thought I was capable of loving anything," he admitted. "More than is what, more than is safe, more than I have any right to." "Then it's real," she said simply, "and it'll work." "You can't know that." "Yes, I can." She reached up, touched the mask, felt him flinch. "Because I know you, and you know me, and that's what love is, recognizing someone completely and choosing them anyway." His hand covered hers on the mask. "The blood moon is tomorrow night," he said. "The ceremony is public. If we do this, if you choose this, everyone will watch. The curse breaking or spreading, your life or death, all of it witnessed." "Good," Morel said. "Let them watch. Let them witness that the cursed girl with silver eyes was worth saving and worth dying for if it comes to that." "It won't come to that," he said fiercely. "I won't let it." "You don't get to control it," she said gently. "None of us do. We just get to choose it. And I'm choosing you." He pulled her close, held her, and for the first time in 800 years, Lucian Corvus let himself hope. The blood moon rose red and huge over Shadowkeep Castle, turning the entire sky the color of fresh blood. The courtyard was packed, every vampire noble in the realm, every human from the surrounding territories. Thousands of witnesses gathered to watch history. Morel stood in the center of the ceremonial circle wearing simple white. No jewelry, no decoration, just herself. Across from her, the king stood in his formal robes, black and silver, the mask catching the moonlight like captured bone. Between them, a silver chalice. Empty. Waiting. Cassian stood at the circle's edge, reading from an ancient text. "The curse of the Corvus line was born of dark magic and desperation. It passes through blood. It consumes humanity. It transforms the afflicted into creatures of pure hunger and rage. For 8 centuries, the mask has held it at bay. But masks crack. Bindings weaken. Tonight, under the blood moon, the curse will either break or spread. He gestured to Morel. The ritual requires sunblood willingly given in an act of true love. If love is genuine, the curse breaks. If love is false, he paused, both will die, the sunblood consumed, the cursed transformed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Morel looked at Lucienne. At the mask that hit him. I need to see you, she said quietly. Your real face before we do this. The crowd went silent. Lucienne's hands came up slowly, touched the edge of the mask. If I remove this, he said, the curse will start spreading immediately. Within minutes, I'll begin transforming. The ritual must happen fast, or... I understand, Morel said. I'm ready. He held her gaze for one long moment. Then he removed the mask. The crowd gasped. His face was young, beautiful, with sharp features and the old scar running down his jaw, but black veins were already spreading from his temples, his eyes flickering between red and something darker. The curse freed from its binding, beginning its work. Morel, his voice was strained. We need to, a shout from the crowd. Stop, Lord Marcus pushed through the gathered witnesses. Behind him, armed guards. This is madness, Marcus declared. The girl is being coerced. The king is using her. I challenge this ritual on grounds of... You challenged nothing, Lucian growled. The curse made his voice deeper, rougher. Marcus smiled, sharp. Then let her go. Let her walk away. Prove she's here by choice. It was a trap. If Lucian let her go, the curse would complete its transformation before any ritual. If he refused, Marcus would claim coercion. But Morel didn't wait for Lucien's response. She pulled the ceremonial knife from her belt, pressed it to her palm. I'm here by choice, she said clearly. My blood, my decision, my love. She cut. Blood welled up, glowing silver in the moonlight. Marcus lunged forward. No. But he was too late. Morel's blood dripped into the chalice. 1 drop, 2, 5, 10. The silver light grew brighter, and then chaos erupted. Marcus's guards attacked. Not the king, Morel, because if she died before completing the ritual, the king would transform. The realm would fall into chaos, and Marcus could seize power in the aftermath. Lucian moved with supernatural speed, intercepted the first guard, the second, fighting even as black veins spread across his face, even as the curse pulled him toward feral transformation. But there were too many. One guard got through, blade aimed at Morel's heart. She stumbled back, fell. The blade came down, and Vivian appeared. From the crowd, moving fast, she grabbed Morel's arm, but not to save her, to hold her, to keep her from reaching the chalice. Did you think I'd let you have this? Vivian hissed in her ear. Let you become queen, while Isadora gets nothing. I've spent 6 years keeping you in your place. I won't stop now. From her belt, she pulled a vial. Poison. Your father was weak, Vivian whispered, so trusting. The poison worked quickly, just like it will on you. The vial came up toward Morel's mouth, but Morel had spent 6 years being invisible, being overlooked, learning to survive by being small and quick and unexpected. She twisted, slammed her elbow into Vivian's throat, broke free. My father, she said, silver blood still dripping from her palm, was kind, and you killed him for his money, for this house, for the same small cruel reasons you've done everything. Vivian lunged again, desperate, vicious, but Lucien was there. He caught Vivian by the throat, lifted her off the ground. The curse was taking hold, yes, but it made him stronger, faster, more dangerous. You dare, he snarled, harm what I cherish. His free hand gestured. Guards surrounded Vivian, Marcus, all the conspirators who'd revealed themselves in their attack. Take them, Lucian commanded. His voice was barely human now, the curse spreading fast. They'll face judgment. He staggered, the black veins now covering half his face, his eyes going dark. Morel, he gasped. Now, she crossed to the chalice, to the silver blood pooled at the bottom. She picked it up, looked at him across the circle. I love you, she said. I choose you. I choose this. Not because I'm cursed or coerced or confused, but because you recognize my worth. And in being valued, I learned to value myself. And I would rather die trying to save you than spend my life regretting that I didn't. She drank the blood, all of it, every drop. The silver light exploded outward. It filled the circle, filled the courtyard, turned everything the color of moonlight and starlight and every impossible beautiful thing. Morel felt it flood through her, felt her blood recognize the curse in Lucien's body, felt the ancient magic activate, felt the connection between them, real, true, genuine, surge forward like a wave. The ritual required love, required choice, required connection. They had all three. The silver light poured from Morel into Lucien. She watched the black veins recede, watched the darkness in his eyes burn away, watched the curse that had held him for 8 centuries shatter like glass under impossible pressure. He fell to his knees, gasping. Whole. The light faded, Morel swayed, felt her legs give out. But Lucien caught her, held her. Alive, both of them alive. The crowd erupted, cheering, shouting, celebrating. But Morel only heard Lucien's voice. "You did it," he whispered. "You broke it. We did it." "Together," she corrected. "We saved each other." He kissed her then, in front of 10,000 witnesses, under the blood moon, with the curse broken and the mask discarded, and both of them whole and real and valued. And Morel kissed him back, because this was her story, not the cursed girl, not the servant, not the invisible one. The girl who'd been told she was worthless and proved them all wrong. The girl who'd saved a king by letting him save her right back. The girl who became a queen. The throne room of Shadowkeep Castle gleamed with morning light, real sunlight, streaming through windows that had been open for the first time in 8 centuries now that the king could walk in daylight without the mask's protection. Morel stood beside Lucien on the dais wearing silver that matched her eyes. Not a servant's clothing, a queen's. Below them, the court assembled for monthly audience. The first petitioner stepped forward. Vivian Ashford. She looked different, smaller. 6 months of imprisonment had stripped away the performance, left only the bitter, frightened woman underneath. "Your Majesties," she said, voice flat, "I've come to hear my sentence." Lucien looked at Morel. This was her choice to make. Morel looked down at the woman who'd tormented her for 6 years. Who'd killed her father? Who'd tried to kill her? "You're exiled," Morel said, "from Shadowkeep, from Ashvale, from the realm. You'll be escorted to the border with enough coin to start elsewhere. What you do with that chance is up to you." But Vivian's eyes widened. "You're letting me go." "I'm letting you go," Morel confirmed. "Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to hate would diminish me, and I'd rather be who I am." Vivian stared, then nodded once, turned, walked away without thanks or apology. Morel watched her go, let her go, because some people never learn. But that was their burden to carry. The next petitioner approached, a merchant from Asheville. "Your Majesty," he said to Morel, "the village sends congratulations. We're proud of what you've become." Tears pricked Morel's eyes. "Thank you." The audience continued. When it ended, when the court dispersed, Lucien turned to her. "How do you feel?" She looked out at the sunlit throne room, at the open windows, at the realm they ruled together. "Valued," she said, "real, like I matter." "You do," he said softly, "more than you know." "They called me cursed," Morel said my silver eyes were bad luck, that I'd never be anything." She looked at him. "But I wasn't cursed, I was rare, and there's a profound difference." "There is," Lucien agreed. They stood together as the sun moved across the floor, and on a shelf in the royal chambers, a small carved wolf sat watching, made by steady hands that had valued curiosity over obedience, made by a mother who'd known her son would find someone who'd change everything. That night, Morel stood at her window looking out over the realm. She thought about her father, about the birds she'd healed, about every moment that had led her here, and she smiled. They'd been wrong about her, all of them, and she'd proven it.